Welcome back to Business 101, Introduction to Business, and welcome also to module number 6. In this module, we're looking at the topic of organizational structure. And you may remember that organizing is one of the 4 primary functions of managers in a business. Now, in this very first lecture, you can see we're looking at organizational structure. And organizational structure is an interesting topic to talk about. We often don't think about it because when we first join an organization, when we apply and when they offer us the job, well, when we join the organization, we realize certain decisions about organizational structure have already been made before we ever got there. In fact, we typically apply for a specific role with a specific job title, with specific tasks. In fact, an awful lot of the framework of organizational structure has already been defined, and that's why we're applying for that specific job. Well, we need to take a step back and understand, how does organizational structure get made? What kinds of considerations do those folks who need to make decisions about the structure, what do they consider, and how do they choose and select what's the most appropriate structure for the organization? So let's ask the question exactly, well, what is organizational structure? And you see 2 points here on this slide. Organizational structure is the specification of the jobs to be done within an organization and the ways in which they relate to one another. Now, think about this for a moment. If you simply decided you needed a company that had 50 people in it, and so you went out and you hired 50 people and just said, look, this is what the company does, do what you can, go get them, without any other detail, what would happen? Well, with 50 people, there'd be complete chaos, right? If there's no real delegation, if there's no specialization, if there's no departmentalization, and there's no direction what to do, what not to do, what should be someone else's task, well, I think you begin to understand why organizational structure is a requisite, is required for business to be efficient and effective. Therefore, you can see why we specify these 2 things on this slide: specification of the jobs to be done within an organization and the ways in which those jobs then relate to one another. Now, one of the ways that have been used for a very long time to show this kinds of relationships visually is the organization chart. And you see an example organization chart represented, figure 6.1, from the textbook right there in front of you on the right-hand side of this slide. What does this diagram say? Well, it depicts a company's structure and shows employees where they fit into the operations. So if you were hired as the buyer of the nursery department or the office manager of the retail shop, this diagram shows you very quickly and simply who you report to, how your department relates to other departments in the company, and as you see there, the second bullet point on the left, it shows you the reporting relationships within a company. It shows you who your boss is and, quite frankly, who your boss's boss is in this particular example. In fact, let's take a closer look at this org chart from the textbook, figure 6.1. You can see that in this particular company, there is a single president, the owner of the company, and reporting to him, there are 3 managers. There's the retail shop manager, the nursery manager, and the landscape operations manager. Now, you can see that that may be segregated into those 3 managers because they operate based upon sales revenue or departmentalization or the type of customers that they're going after. But nevertheless, you see 3 managers, the blue boxes, report to the president owner of Contemporary Landscape Services Incorporated. Those 3 managers, in turn, have several folks who report to them, And two each are outlined here, right? The retail shop manager has a buyer and an office manager. The nursery manager has a buyer and a supervisor. And the landscape operations manager shows that a residential manager and a commercial accounts manager reports to him as well. So you can sort of see this diagram is very, very useful in showing you reporting relationships, structure, and how the chain of command works in this organization. What determines how you set up an organizational structure? Well, there's several things, and you can see some of them pointed out here on this slide. What is the actual mission of the company? You'll find that, of course, in the mission statement. What is the ongoing strategy? Remember, we talked about in the last set of lectures, setting organizational goals and then the strategy for how to accomplish those things. The size of the company will oftentimes determine what your organizational structure has to look like. And then, of course, there are considerations about the internal environment. In other words, what is your company? What's its strengths and weaknesses? Who makes it up? What is your distinctive competitive advantage, etc., right? As well as the external environment, elements in the marketplace, with your customers, with your vendors and suppliers, and with your competitors that will determine your decisions on how you decide to structure the organization. Now again, as we start out this series of lectures on organizational structure, we'll touch on several things like specialization and departmentalization and all those kinds of things. And again, I realize that as we go through this material, you may feel a little bit detached from it because, quite frankly, you may not be making decisions on how to structure a company. You'll simply be inheriting a structure that already exists when you join an organization. In fact, even when you begin leading and managing an organization or department of an organization, a lot of the structure has already been set in place before you ever got there. However, there are certain aspects of organizational structure which will have direct impact upon your life and career. And so you have to understand what are the strengths and weaknesses of various decisions you'll make in organizational structure in order to navigate your employer, navigate your organization, and navigate your career well. We'll talk about that more as we continue on in this series in module number 6. I hope this is helpful. We'll see you in the next lecture.